A battle-hardened veteran, his soul still scarred by the ashes of war, made the fateful decision to return home, not by plane, not by car, but on foot. Marching from the forests of Laos across untamed wilderness, swarms of insects, and forgotten trails that time had nearly erased. But destiny had one more trial for him. As he passed through a quiet British village, a quaint on the surface but ruled by unspoken laws, he unknowingly crossed an invisible boundary. Two local officers, barely out of academy blues, flagged him down with an air of misplaced authority. They demanded identification. The man paused, calmly opened his bag. One of the officers reached inside, suspicious. His hand brushed something cold. The veteran lifted his shirt, revealing a blade tucked into his belt. The officers flinched. "What is this?" one barked. The man didn't blink. "A kukri, issued, licensed." Still, the officers didn't back off. They demanded he surrender the weapon. One of them reached again, trying to grab it. The veteran moved with trained speed, unfurling the blade just enough for them to see its unmistakable curve. Not a criminal's weapon, but a soldier's soul. The kukri of the Nepalese army. Before the officers could react, one of them lunged with his baton. The veteran sidestepped effortlessly. The second officer tried too, only to be shoved to the floor with a swift, calculated motion. Realizing they were no match, the young men pulled out their firearms. The veteran, ever calm, raised his hands. "You don't want this," he said. But they did, or at least they thought they did. He turned around to comply, only for a baton to strike his back. He didn't scream. He didn't stumble. He just turned and stared, a look that made their skin crawl, eyes that said one thing: "You've made a mistake." At the station, they stripped him of his belongings and tossed him into a cell. The place was no model of law. It was a theater of corruption, where even minor offenses became a scheme to extort the townspeople, the guards splitting the cash like war plunder. The captain entered, gruff, arrogant, hiding cruelty behind a badge. "Why won't you talk?" he demanded. The man remained silent. Infuriated, the captain struck him. The veteran let out a low, guttural sound, not of pain, but restraint. That only enraged the officer further. He lifted his baton again, swinging for the face. "You look at me when I talk to you." Finally, the veteran moved. He dodged, snatched the man's stun baton mid-air, headbutted him, one clean motion, then spun, swept the captain's legs and brought him crashing down. The other officers rushed in, but the aura had changed. They felt it now, the shift. This wasn't a man. He was a storm. A few tense seconds later, they had no choice but to bring him before the deputy director. The air shifted again. This man was different, older, smarter, less eager to flex his power. He spotted the kukri on the desk, picked it up gently. "What are you doing with this in our town?" he asked. The veteran met his gaze. Not with pride, not with threat, just calm honesty. "It's not a weapon, it's my history." The director paused. Hamas nodded. With a motion of respect, he ordered the handcuffs removed and began to review the man's documents himself. Because sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge. It walks through the door in silence. The man's name? Saman, a major in an elite international task force. The moment his identity was confirmed, the blood drained from the officers' faces. The very name made the youngest cop tremble. He nearly wet himself in regret. They'd messed with someone untouchable. The station's director sprang into action, ordering the immediate return of all Saman's belongings. Apologies flowed faster than coffee in a break room. Everything seemed to be smoothing over, until the director, blinded by curiosity or arrogance, picked up Saman's most prized possession, a megapixel 3 music player. He hit play. The moment the beat dropped, the fool danced, not with grace, not with rhythm, but like a man possessed. The entire police station turned into a circus of disbelief. Saman turned to leave. He had one foot outside the gate when a soft voice caught his attention. A familiar face. A beautiful girl. Her eyes sparked something in his memory, and then it hit him. He'd left his megapixel 3 behind. That device wasn't just music, it was medicine. When the world grew heavy, that little player was the thread that held his mind together. He turned back, and that's when he saw it. The director, the same man who had disrespected him just moments ago, was now forcing himself onto the girl. She was backed into a corner, eyes wide, trembling. Salman froze. He didn't want to interfere, it wasn't his battle. But then he saw it, his megapixel 3 still in the man's hand. He took a step forward. Silently, methodically, he reached for the power cord. Wrapping it around his fingers with military precision, he clipped the megapixel 3 between his index and middle fingers like a makeshift knuckle weapon. He turned. The director approached him, sneering. That was his final mistake. Salman didn't hesitate. A twist of the waist, a clean strike, not brutal, but precise. The blow landed with the power of a trained warrior. The man dropped like a sack of bricks. Another officer stumbled in, only to get a glancing blow to the forehead and crumpled as well. Salman didn't stop. He picked up an ashtray, slipped his phone into his pocket, lit his lighter, and scooped the unconscious girl into his arms as though nothing had happened. Walking down the hallway, he crossed paths with another officer. The man barely opened the door when Salman launched the ashtray, striking him clean across the head. Salman didn't miss. In the courtyard, more officers tried to block his path, guns drawn, but Salman was faster. With a flick of his wrist, the end of the phone cord lashed out instantly, knocking one out cold. The rest disarmed before they could blink. The girl followed, stunned, her eyes wide with awe. Who was this man? They didn't have time to speak. As they tried to escape, they accidentally stumbled into the break room, full of officers who had already had history with Salman. Old grudges reignited. He pushed the girl outside, turned back, and cracked his knuckles. It was time for payback. With ruthless grace, Salman dismantled them. One tried to grab him. He twisted the arm 360 degrees, then reversed. The man hit the ground howling. The others didn't fare much better. At the base of the stairs, they ran into the deputy director. Before the man could even ask what was happening, Salman landed a knockout punch right to his temple. The deputy dropped. 3 moves, 3 officers down. He didn't want to kill them. If he had used even a fraction more of his battlefield tactics, no one would have walked away. Outside, one officer, barely conscious, lit a cigarette with a police-issued lighter. Salman took it. A spark lit in the wind. Behind him, the girl clutched her arm, still dazed. Her eyes welled up, not from pain, but guilt. She knew this mess was her fault. If they were caught, she wouldn't survive the consequences. Her voice cracked. "You need to go, now. Don't look back. Forget me." But Salman didn't move. Inside, the captain had regained consciousness, humiliated, bloodied, his pride shattered. And the first thing he did? Call for backup. Because to him, this wasn't just a man who embarrassed him. This was war, and he wasn't about to lose the girl. Salman barely made it out of the alley before he spotted trouble, a police officer lunging for the girl. Without thinking, he pivoted and slammed the officer to the ground with a bone-snapping thud. The girl stared at him, tears brimming, refusing to run. Behind them, sirens wailed. A squad car roared into view, tires screeching, no time for hesitation. Salman grabbed her hand, dragged her toward a nearby truck, hot-wired it in seconds, and slammed the gas pedal. The chase was on. The entire police force had been mobilized, dead set on hunting down the man who'd humiliated them. Bullets whizzed past as Salman zigzagged through tight streets. He shifted his weight to dodge one round. Another grazed his shoulder. It didn't slow down. At the last second, he yanked the wheel, drifting into a narrow alley just wide enough for the truck. The police gave chase, but their aim was poor, their weapons outdated. They emptied clips into the walls and sky, never coming close to hitting him. Then came the slope. Salman saw it. Trung Kong Ridge, a steep descent leading into a dense industrial zone. Perfect cover. He floored it. One of the captains jumped off his bike and went full rampage, unloading his rifle. The bullets sprayed the air. He emptied the magazine, switched to his pistol, and fired again. Not one bullet found its mark. Frustrated and furious, the captain jumped into a second vehicle. But Saman was already ahead, commandeering a bulldozer from a nearby site. With shocking precision, he drove the beast straight into the path of the captain's car. Meadows screamed. The front shovel crunched down on the police cruiser's hood, pinning it in place. Inside, the captain screamed orders, but then, out of nowhere, a second vehicle slammed into them from behind. Friendly fire. Panic spread like wildfire. One of the officers, recognizing the chaos they had unleashed, began reviewing Saman's background. His face turned pale. Saman wasn't just anyone. He was a decorated operative from the Meron Special Forces Unit, twice awarded the National Order of Valor, veteran of countless classified missions. This wasn't a fugitive. This was a ghost the military had tried to forget. And now they had awakened him. At that very moment, Saman roared toward the mountains. The higher he climbed, the more unstoppable he became. He knew the police wouldn't quit. He knew this wasn't just a manhunt. It was war. And if they wanted to play, he'd show them how the game was really played. By dusk, he had found a ruined compound, abandoned, half consumed by the forest. There, he scavenged. An old box of matches, loose electrical wires, rusted nails, wooden rods. While the police grumbled about camping in the rain and waiting for orders, Saman was building. He wrapped nails at the ends of wooden shafts, securing them with wire. He sharpened sticks, forged makeshift tridents, constructed traps. Then, like a hunter awaiting the foolish prey, he returned to the heart of the shack. From his pocket he pulled out his Megapixel 3, plugged in his headphones, let the music focus his mind. This was the calm before the storm. Not long ago, Saman had brought an entire station to its knees for the sake of protecting a single innocent girl. Now he had killed 2 pursuing officers. The force camped nearby, unleashing dogs and prepping helicopters. But none dared call in special operations. Because they were terrified that the truth would come out. That they hadn't just crossed a line. They'd declared war on a warrior. But what they didn't know was that Saman was already 10 steps ahead, tracking their movements, reading their formation, and planning an ambush they would never forget. That night, 2 senior officers shared a bottle of brandy in a makeshift tent, laughing, bragging, underestimating, and Saman decided it was time to act. Under the cloak of night, the police believed they had him cornered. Convinced this would be the final act, they advanced through the dense forest, their boots crunching softly over leaves and twigs. Up ahead, they spotted the flicker of firelight. Hope ignited in their eyes. This was it, the moment to redeem themselves. They cut their headlights, drew their weapons, and crept in silently. But they were walking into a trap. The first officer to charge was hit squarely in the forehead by a plank laced with bronze arrowheads. He dropped instantly. As the others scrambled to react, one reached for his weapon, only to have it kicked out of his hands by a blur moving in the shadows. Saman? Before the second could raise his baton, Saman brought down a flaming staff, pinning him to the forest floor. But he didn't kill them. Instead, he dragged the groaning officers over to the fire pit, forced them to cuff each other, and stacked firewood around them like they were nothing more than kindling. "You tell your major," Saman said in a tone colder than the night air, "don't come looking for me." By morning, the police command realized their men hadn't returned. Frustrated and humiliated, they launched a full-force sweep. The search team kicked open the doors of a remote cabin, only to find their own men sitting dazed, bruised, and confused. One had a bloody nose, the other still stunned. The captain tried to salvage his pride, whispering, "We nearly caught him." But his subordinate leaned close and muttered, "Sir, he said to stop. It's not worth it." The captain's face twisted with rage. He slapped the man hard across the cheek and barked, "Find him, now." And so the hunt escalated. As the forest echoed with distant gunfire and barking dogs, Saman moved like smoke, everywhere and nowhere. He knew the terrain better than they did. He had set more traps. And now, He was watching. 2 officers unknowingly stepped into a pressure snare. Before they could cry out, Saman struck. The hand-carved trident flew through the air, striking with pinpoint accuracy. Then he vanished, repositioned, and circled back. The officers panicked. Bullets flew wildly, nearly hitting their own men. The forest turned against them. "He's toying with us," one of them screamed. In a moment of desperation, the captain dispatched 2 of his most trusted men to chase Saman while others held position, but it was a fatal miscalculation. Saman doubled back and silently picked off those left behind. He moved quickly, disabling, not killing, slitting cords, removing clips, disassembling rifles. When one injured man groaned, Saman hoisted him onto his shoulder and carried him to a vehicle, then vanished again like fog rolling off the river. He didn't want blood, but he wouldn't tolerate foolishness. The police chief pushed his team toward Dokmak Bridge, still refusing to call in real special forces. Arrogance clouded his judgment. They were dealing with a soldier bred for war, and they didn't even realize it. The bridge was a trap in itself. 2 thin wooden logs stretched over a river swollen with current. A single misstep, and you'd plunge into the depths. Saman was already there. He'd been waiting. Shots rang out across the trees, but every round missed. The police were chasing shadows. By the time they regrouped in the clearing, their numbers had dwindled. The slow and reckless had already been taken down. This time, the police chief tried something different. He stopped, planted himself. "I'll wait," he said. "He has to come out eventually." And he was right. From the tree line, Saman stepped forward, his expression unreadable. His trident gleamed in the fading light. The police chief reached for his sidearm. Too slow. With a flick of his wrist, Saman launched the trident. It hit the gun just as it cleared the holster. Startled, the chief pulled the trigger, only to shoot himself in the foot. Screaming in pain, he hobbled backward. Sweat poured down his face, his pride shattered. He stumbled over the slick wooden planks of the bridge, almost falling into the current below. Behind him, the sound of soft footsteps. Saman never said a word. It's because his silence was louder than any threat. The police chief thought it was over, that Saman had fled into the dark. He was wrong. Saman was right behind him. Before the chief could react, Saman had already disarmed him, flicked the magazine from his sidearm, pulled the slide, and caught the bullet in mid-air. He held it up, a symbol of warning, not war. The chief froze. "Never anger a Miron beret," Saman said, his voice like a distant thunderclap. He struck. The chief collapsed, blood dripping from his ear, dazed and powerless, still not fully grasping the lesson. "Forget me," Saman whispered. "I'm not a ghost. I'm a consequence. Keep pushing and more will die." Saman walked away. Behind him the chief lay defeated, humiliated, but alive. His bravado shattered. As Saman returned to the mountain's edge, a new figure awaited him. Sunglasses, stoic posture, no fear. Colonel Demin, an officer from the Defense Intelligence Agency, and more importantly, Saman's former commander. No one knew Saman better than Demin. He had trained him, witnessed his brilliance, and his breaking points. "He's losing control," Demin warned. "Stop hunting him, let him disappear. That's your best chance of survival." But the chief didn't listen. He never listened. Moments later, word came. Military helicopters were en route. With false confidence swelling again, the chief ordered a full lockdown, determined to flush Saman out once and for all. But air superiority meant nothing to a man who lived in the shadows. When the choppers arrived, Saman vanished into the cliffs. Bullets chased him like angry hornets. He didn't flinch, didn't panic. Instead, he leapt off the cliff's edge, plunging into the river far below. The choppers circled above, but there was no body, only ripples. The chief, furious, ordered patrol boats downriver. Minutes passed, then hours. Nothing. Saman had disappeared again. He hadn't wanted any of this, not the violence, not the bloodshed. but they had awakened something they couldn't put back in the cage, a beast that had only wanted peace. Later, an old fisherman found Saman's broken body washed ashore. He brought him home, unaware that the man he saved was the reason the region was on lockdown. The girl, yes, the same girl Saman had risked everything for, was there too. She gasped when she saw him, pale, bleeding, barely alive. Her guilt pierced deeper than any blade. "This is all because of me," she whispered. The old man worked with practiced hands, removing bullets, packing wounds, and when his strength faltered, the girl took over, sewing flesh with shaking fingers, tears in her eyes. That night, Saman awoke. The room was silent. He knew what came next. But the girl stopped him. "I'm coming with you," she said. "If they find me, I won't survive. With you, I have a chance." Saman hesitated. He was weak, the fight had drained him. But he saw the fire in her eyes, and nodded. They found shelter in a nearby abandoned apartment. One night, just one, to gather strength. But fate had other plans. Just before dawn, the door crashed open. Armed men stormed in, not police, not soldiers, criminals. 5 fugitives recently escaped from prison had stumbled upon the wrong house. The old man stood his ground, only to be gunned down. The shots echoed across the valley. Police nearby heard them, but by the time they arrived, the robbery had become a massacre. Saman had no choice. Still wrapped in bandages, he handed his dagger to the girl and stepped outside alone. His breath was shallow, body weak, but his mind sharp. He posed as a wounded man, stumbling into the chaos to blend with the robbers. But in the attic above, the girl had been discovered. One of the thugs, a blonde with cruel eyes, struck her. As she recoiled in fear, Saman turned his head slightly and winked. Because now the game had changed. And these criminals were about to find out what hell looked like. Saman locked the barn door tight behind him, then nodded toward the girl in the attic. She understood instantly. She distracted the thugs by pretending to cooperate, winking subtly at Saman before walking out into the open. These men, violent fugitives who had escaped from a maximum security prison, were now planning their next escape through the waterway. But their boat engine was broken, and they didn't know how to fix it. Saman stepped forward. "I can help." The gang leader looked him up and down. His hand's steady skill gave him away. This man wasn't just a wanderer. He had training. The leader motioned for the blonde and another thug to guard him, but allowed him to inspect the engine. That was Saman's chance. He asked for tools and slipped away, heading back toward the barn to rescue the girl. But before he reached her, the blonde intercepted him. "Where do you think you're going?" he sneered. "I need a part," Saman said, keeping his voice calm. The blonde nodded slowly, then smirked. "I'll go check the barn." Inside, the girl was hiding, clutching the dagger Saman had given her. The blonde entered, closed the door behind him, and began to circle. He dropped his mask of charm and revealed the monster beneath. He grabbed her. She panicked, lashed out, kicked him hard in the groin, and fled to the sidewalk. Her mind raced. The dagger. She still had the dagger. The blonde came after her, now furious. But she was ready.